Okay, we're going to get started here. So my name is Andres Sevcuk. I'm an associate professor of urban planning and design at Harvard. I'll be moderating this session where we look at smart city solutions in Paris and New York. I'm going to have a very, very brief introduction and then pass it on to our speakers, who will both make about a 15-minute presentation, and we'll have hopefully some time for discussion at the very end. So I just asked the organizers to put up one single slide. It's an op-ed I recently wrote for a China Daily, a major newspaper in China, about smart cities. And there's a certain sort of question or divide or confusion, I believe, in the field of urban planning about what exactly smart cities do in the context of improving cities at large, and whether a heavy emphasis on technological solutions, data, etc., actually gets us closer to a quality-built environment that we all seek. And I'm very happy to have two speakers from two amazing cities of the world that I've never actually lived in New York, but it's close enough to Boston that I know it fairly well. I have lived about 3.5 years in Paris, and I must say we're, talking about this topic of technology and quote-unquote smart solutions in two cities that are already great. So I'm very curious to see what you have in mind in terms of how they can get better through solutions and topics that you introduce. So I'm going to very briefly introduce the speakers. First, we have Carlos Moreno, who's a mayor of Paris special envoy for smart cities. Carlos is also a professor in Paris Sorbonne. He is a director and co-founder of the chair of Entrepreneurship, Territory and Innovation unit at the university. So thank you very much for joining us. We have also Sonam Velani, who is a senior advisor to the deputy mayor of New York City. Sonam, turns out, has also a degree from Harvard, so we share some Boston connections here. She has received multiple awards and been in this work for a while, including the President's Volunteer Service Award. She leads the Financial Empowerment Program at the Aga Khan Development Network, and has been a Choral Leadership Fellow. So I won't go too deep into their backgrounds. You should have that in the apps that you all have from the workshop. But let's start with Carlos, you, a brief presentation. We'll have a timekeeper, and then turn it over to Sonam and have a discussion. So I encourage everybody to think of questions and ideas that you might want to already mark down. We'll solicit them just when they finish. We have mics.
You have the... Okay. Thank you for this introduction. Hi, everybody. I want to share with you the vision of the city of Paris about smart cities, and in particular the strategic plan for 2020 and beyond. Up. It's okay? Okay, good. Okay, the city of Paris is a global city. This is the concept produced by our friend sociologist Saskia Sassen from Harvard. And indeed, this is the case of the city of Paris, a global city. What is what is today the most significant challenges for cities, and in particular for Paris, of course? We think with the mayor of Paris that, it's okay? We think that the most relevant challenge today for cities, for humanity, is climate change. Because the question is if we could survive at the end of this century in our planet. For that, we need to reach at the horizon 2050 the carbon neutrality. For that, we need at the horizon 2030 in at least 10 years to radically reduce the CO2 emissions at least 60% of CO2 emissions. This is today the reality. Climate change is today a very important challenge for cities, for metropolises, for megalopolises, for regions, for countries, and before all, for human beings. What is the role of cities today about climate change? This is the picture with 50 degrees in the Middle East, but today this is the reality, including in Paris last week. We have one of the most significant heat wave, but this is the case all years. All years we have this map. This is the summer, just 1 year before, with the heat wave in the totality of Europe. The temperatures about 40 degrees Celsius. This is today, currently. Last week in Paris we have almost 40, and in several cities in France we reach until 45 degrees Celsius. Definitely, this is for the city of Paris today a real challenge. This picture was taken 3 years ago with the Paris Agreement, because the city of Paris hosted the Conference of Parties 21. The state nations signed the Paris Agreement in order to reduce the CO2 emissions at the horizon 2020, 2030, and 2050. Unfortunately, this is not the reality today. We have today the increase of temperatures between more 3 and 5 degrees Celsius. This is very dangerous for humanity, in particular in cities. This is the photo of the former mayor of New York, Michael Bloomberg, because the mayor of Paris, Ms. Anne Hidalgo, has been sharing, because until the end of the year, the C40 Cities, the network for cities for climate, in order to develop a very strong consultation, collaboration in cities, in order to contribute to reduce the CO2 emissions around the world. We have today, with the Mayor of Paris, a very ambitious program with 19 cities around the world. This represents around 900 million inhabitants. What is today, for the city of Paris, the point to propose a new strategic plan? The starting point is the comprehension that the cities as a living organism. The cities are alive. We need to understand the cities with urban metabolism. We need to define the DNA of cities. And unfortunately, today, we need in cities to rediscover elementary things. For example, water. For example, air. For example, shade. We need today to rediscover water, air, shade. This is the elementary things for life. But today, we need to rediscover those elements. But at the same time, in the 21st century, we live in the century of massive ubiquity, massive hyperconnectivity. The ubiquitous today offer the possibility to develop with the artificial intelligence several applications, tools, the capabilities to predict different situations. But we need to rediscover as well not only a virtual world, we need to rediscover a real world. Water, air, shade for cities, and at the same time to rediscover space to live, time to live, is silence to live, because we live today surrounded by all kinds of fake news, digital bubbles, noisy informations. Today, this is the starting point for the construction of the Paris Smart and Sustainable Strategic Plan at the horizon 2020 and beyond. What is this strategic plan? The strategic plan is based in two key elements. The first one, toward a post-carbon city. The second point, to reinvent urban commons. This is the two main points for the strategic plan of the city of Paris. We have challenges. Today, we have several opportunities and a real big ambition. The challenges today, climate change, urbanizations, optimize natural resources, in particular, this idea of reduction of CO2 emissions, greening city, urban agriculture, soft mobility, optimize the last kilometer of urban logistics, waste, and social inclusion and resilience. The opportunities, we have the opportunities to develop with the digital transformations, the new services, the new usages in cities. Digital economy for urban life, new urban production modes in order to reduce the method to move in cities, the smart mobilities, to rediscover the proximity, to rediscover the hyper proximity, to offer smart public services with digital usages, and to transform the data and services with this important point, the digital inclusion, the digital for all. Our ambition in the city of Paris is reinventing city for all citizens, not only for several people, but for the majority of people. We wanted to improve the quality of life, to propose the new urban development, to reuse the urbanism based on humanistic urbanism, to develop the city of 15 minutes, the city of 15 minutes, the city with the hyper proximity and encouraging innovative initiative. Our strategic plan, of course, our target, the sustainable city. Our method, to develop the open city. Our tools, our leverage, the digital transformation by connected city. What is the example about it? Sustainable city, energy, mobility, circular economy, waste. The open city is not only the technological open city. This is the open data, of course, but at the same time, the open governance, the open innovation, citizen participation, and innovative ecosystem. If we wanted to develop the connected city, this is the capabilities to offer new digital services, but at the same time, digital inclusion, platforms for host applications, and platforms to develop the connectivity by things, the Internet of Things. Several examples. The sustainable city, we have today this roadmap we finished in the next year, because in the next year is the end of this election for Miss Hidalgo. We have been developing bike sharing and electrical bike sharing. Paris is the first city to offer electrical bike sharing, multimodal mobility. We will finish almost 1,400 bike lanes in cities to offer the bike mobilities. We ban diesel car in 2020, and we redesign public space. The iconic places are totally redesigned for pedestrian. The open city is our methodology based on stimulating citizen participation and collaborative project to co-creating with French and international researchers, scientists, and to develop the Parisian and international innovation ecosystem promoting public innovation. This is one of examples. The city of Paris is the city in the world which offers the biggest participatory budgeting. 10% of the budget of the city of Paris is totally allocated for citizens in order to propose projects in the districts in the city of Paris, and citizens via a digital platform vote to choose the project. 800 million euros for that each year in order to develop the participatory project with this participatory budgeting. The economic development, do you know this photo? This is the Station F, the biggest incubator and accelerator for startups in Europe. We have 34,000 square meters totally dedicated to develop a powerful, innovative ecosystem by entrepreneurship, startup, the collaboration of corporate and international cooperation. This is the case of Sonia and the city of New York. The connected city, for finish, this is the way to develop new infrastructure for digital services, to offer a new public service, to optimize the data, and to transform the data in services. The city of Paris has been developing for 10 years a very powerful open data system. We have been developing the co-working, and we have developing the digital transformation for the employees of the city of Paris with the possibility to create the startups after. And we have the contest called Data City Paris. Data City Paris is a very significant initiative because it is the possibility for develop a strong cooperation between academic, scientists, researchers, startups, and corporates. We define each year several topics, and we propose for each one to develop a powerful ecosystem during 1 year in order to propose the concrete solutions. I want to finish with several pictures. This is the Paris Plage since 2002. This is the former highway. Today, this is the Paris Plage, the beach, the urban beach. And this is the possibility for transform the former highway in a new urban park. Rive de Seine. This is today we are very proud to have this Rive de Seine park, and this is the new method for the city of Paris to reinventing cities The name is Reinventing Paris, Reinventing Metropolis, with the C40 Cities is Reinventing Cities. This is the new kind of international context in order to develop a new sustainable cities. If we wanted to put it in a nutshell, in one sentence, our vision, we need the real convergence with an ecological vision to develop with the technology the new innovative ecosystem with startups and corporates, and to develop at the same time the social inclusion in order to build a sustainable city. We will host at 2024 the Olympic Games. We will hard work in order to host the first ecological games, inclusive games, and this is very, very deep transformation for the north of Paris. Thank you.
Okay, let's go straight to Sonam and engage in the discussion after both of them.
I wanted to wait a little bit. Don't want to stand right in front of the screen. So I'm Sonam Velani. I am here from New York City, and I was actually in Paris last week, surviving the heat wave. It was very, very hot. But I will say that the picnics along the Seine were wonderful. So, but I wanted to talk to you a bit about smart cities broadly, but I think the focus of my presentation is actually going to be about economic development. So how do you leverage technology to actually uplift individuals to be able to then participate in a lot of the initiatives that our cities and city governments are launching? And for us, a big, big focus in New York City has been on inclusive innovation and economic growth. Our mission statement is very much so focused on that. How do we, as New York, become a global model for inclusive innovation and economic growth, particularly fueled by the diversity of our people and businesses? I don't know if you have been to New York recently, but it is a city that in which 800 languages are spoken. You can find food from every single corner of the world in New York City. And how do we sort of build on that diversity to make sure that the products and the tools that we are creating and that our private sector are creating can cater to this wide range of individuals? Part and parcel of that is building strong neighborhoods and creating good jobs. If we think about economic development, strong neighborhoods are the pillar of where you live your day-to-day life, right? You get up, you go to school, you go to work, you come home, you spend time in a park, you go grocery shopping, you do a lot of different activities within probably a half-hour distance of your home, and we want to make sure that every single individual in New York City has access to these services and that they are high-quality services. On the second point on creating good jobs, New York City is actually at the highest employment rate it has ever been at. We have a private sector job growth of about 4.5 million people. We are a city of 8.5 million people. Our unemployment rate is just around 4%. Which is very, very low. But what we've seen, particularly since over the past decade, since the recession, has been that there is growth in very high-income sectors of the economy. So think about finance, technology, professional services, legal, and those sorts of industries. And then there's growth in very low-income sectors of the economy. So restaurants, food service workers, hotel operators, and maintenance staff. That is not a good way to grow. So how do we think about that middle, right? And how do we continue to focus on job growth in that middle sector and make sure that our the programs that the city is providing cater to that? Tech is everywhere, and I think one of the big things that we focus on in New York is that we just don't think about technology as one industry. What we call our economic development strategy is the hyphen tech economy. So New York City has health tech, fintech, fashion tech, wearable technology, right? There's a whole host of things that technology goes across the board, and these days is actually an underlying base layer. Even if I go to my local grocery store, I pay with my phone and tap a card. That in and of itself is technology. So how do we enable businesses to be part and parcel of that transformation? And also how do we grow new companies, new startups within our ecosystem to develop that? And New York City, to be honest, technology, the industry has grown 6 times the level of any other industry in New York over the past 10 years, which just goes to show the sort of unanimous nature of what we're dealing with. You know, one of the things that we focus on in terms of fueling entrepreneurship is the categorization of industries. New York has a significant number of anchor industries. If you think about the development of New York City in the 1920s, we were the garment capital of the world. Every single t-shirt that you wore was made in New York. That is no longer the case. But a lot of that transformation has now been more high-end and bespoke fashions. And how do we sort of continue to focus on that, because they're better paying jobs. We provide grants for fashion manufacturers who still produce in New York, because we think that it is a good industry to have, particularly for that middle income sector. Healthcare is another one, right? 14% of our workforce works in the healthcare industry, and that includes everything from individuals who are in the hospitals to home health aides, which are very low-paying jobs. Again, how do we transform those industries? How do we bring technology into those industries? I'll skip over to growing industries. Clean tech, of course, is one of the big ones as we think about sustainability issues. How do we ensure that the technology that we are developing can help us solve for our ecological problems? In New York City, we have a big focus on energy efficiency, resiliency mechanisms. We have a mandate that every single one of our buildings has to be retrofitted to go to zero emissions by 2050, which is a huge mandate. And we need a lot of creative individuals to help us get there. Life sciences I'll talk about in a bit, and then what are the emerging industries, right? So what are things that are just coming off the chain? Blockchain is a very good example. Cybersecurity is another good example. These are nascent industries that require a significant amount of talent, and what should the city government be doing to support individuals to create new businesses in those industries and hire additional people? So how do we do all of this, right? So I sort of think about this as what are the tools that a city government using its tax powers leverage to be able to accommodate that growth and ensure that its citizens are participating in that growth. The first is infrastructure. This includes both space for new companies as well as sort of programmatic activities. We have a number of incubators across our industries to focus on creating space, right? No matter where you are, most businesses these days are online, but you still need workers, right? You still need to talk to each other, and you still need to gather in spaces to be able to do that. So we've done that in, of course, the urban tech industry, the fashion industry, the life sciences industry. The second is around community and networks. So we have a number of programs that bring people together to foster connections, right? This means that just like this forum, people from all over the world are coming in, are sharing ideas, building new businesses, building new ideas together. The third is around talent. So as I mentioned, New York City has 8 million people. We need to make sure that the vast majority of those are employed in good paying jobs. And how do we attract more talent, right? Every single city around the world, particularly mega cities, are trying to get the best and brightest people to come to their city, because those are the individuals who are going to pay a lot of taxes, pay my salary, pay your salary, and make the city great. So that is a big focus on talent attraction and on how do we ensure homegrown talent. And then finally is funding. So funding for new companies, new ideas. And again, the city actually dedicates quite a bit of our budget to fostering that. And I'll go into some details and give some examples. So the first is around the Urban Tech Incubator. Just like Station F in Paris, which I got to visit last week, we have something called the New Lab. And it is a comprehensive program to support innovations that address some of the biggest urban challenges around the world. It's an incubator. It has prototyping facilities. It has programs for piloting, so actually connecting to city agencies to solve these problems. And some of the things that we're focusing on are affordable housing challenges, energy efficiency issues, faster transportation. A lot of the bike share companies that we see around the world were actually started in this very space. So we're very, very proud of that and are looking to grow that in terms of the companies that are at this location to be full-fledged businesses when they graduate. The second is around life sciences. New York City has an incredible number of research institutions, some of the best institutions in the world for genomics, cancer therapy, Alzheimer's research, what have you. And we have a lot of big pharmaceutical companies in New York. And we have the largest hospital system in the United States and the most diverse population in the United States. So any disease you can think of probably exists in New York. And the beauty of that is that you have this petri dish of sorts for researchers to come in and think about, what are new drugs that I can develop? What are new medical technologies that I can develop? 3D printing of organs and all sorts of things happen in New York. What happens is that the research, when it goes to commercialize, often leaves New York, and it's because we don't have enough space. Real estate is a huge, huge challenge in our city. So we, about 2 years ago, launched a $500 million program to bolster the life sciences industry in New York and connect the researchers to the industry players, unlock space for growing companies, and then also focus on entrepreneurship and a talented workforce. And a big part of that is actually to build a brand new state-of-the-art campus, about a $300 million campus that brings together the venture community, the big pharmaceuticals, the entrepreneurs, all under one roof so that they can create and test and get funding all in the same space. Another example is digital.nyc, specifically focused on community networks. This is literally just a website, and you can go online. And the great thing about this site is that it takes information from every single corner of New York City and puts it onto one platform. Oftentimes, if you're searching for a new job or a new co-working space, you don't know where to go, right? You're overwhelmed with Google results. So this sort of puts everything together and directs people to where can I get funding, where can I go to a meetup, where can I meet engineers to share ideas on new companies. Another big focus of, this is especially something that I care about a lot and have worked on for many, many years, is supporting women entrepreneurs in New York City. There are over 350,000 small business owners who are women, and it is an incredible growth story in our city. That said, oftentimes when comparing men and women-owned businesses, the women-owned businesses don't grow as quickly. Their revenues are not as high. So we actually went around in 2014 and talked to 1,500 women across the city with Post-it notes and SWOT analyses and all sorts of things to figure out why that was. And some of the biggest reasons, and I'm sure many of you can relate to, are that women don't have access to capital. The rates of women trying to go to a bank, get a loan, are 85% lower than that of men. That's a huge statistic. They often don't know where to go to meet other founders. Women are too busy taking care of children and can't actually go out and meet people. So what we've done is taken a whole host of these things and sort of tried to address each and every single one of these problems through a program called We NYC. And We NYC has now served about 7,000 women in helping start and launch their businesses in every sector of the economy. We do everything from providing credit workshops to business management 101, leadership training. We connect mentors to women. We provide free legal advice. Again, the whole gamut of things. And we actually leverage a lot of technology to do this. One of my favorite programs is Crowdfunding Initiative, where I can log on to a website called Kiva and lend as little as $25 to a woman entrepreneur to help her start her own company, which is fantastic. Another one, and this might be of interest to many of you in this room who may or may not want to come to New York at some point, but as you likely know, our immigration system in America is not so great and should be reformed, but hopefully we will be able to do that at some point. But what we tried to do is actually, we want entrepreneurs from all over the world to come to New York. And actually, Paris is a very good example of this partnership. So what we launched is this creative program where we partner with our local universities who are able to sponsor entrepreneurs to come to New York, work in the co-working spaces within those universities, hire interns and talent from those universities to work in these companies. And then the entrepreneurs themselves also teach at the universities. They may teach one course or they may do a mentorship program. And again, the goal is to sort of address this H-1B challenge, which some of you might be familiar with, and have a workaround to it until there is a sort of more comprehensive national solution to this. And I know I'm running out of time, so I'll quickly go through the rest, but another big issue is, again, talent. New York City, a few years ago, launched the first major new university in New York, focused particularly on applied sciences and engineering in partnership with Cornell University, which is a university in upstate New York, and Technion, which is a university based in Israel. And this is a brand new campus that has come up, NetZero Campus. We're very proud of that. And the goal is, again, to be a driver for innovation and new product development. As you can see, this is an area called Roosevelt Island in New York. So on that side is Manhattan, and on this side is Queens, the borough of Queens. So all of these entrepreneurs can essentially take a ferry, go across the river, and start their own businesses and have a lot of space to grow. And we're hoping that about 1,000 companies come out of this initiative at least over the first 5 years, and we're getting pretty close. The next is around NYC X, which is initiative where, again, we have huge urban problems. How do we leverage the work of the private sector to solve those problems and actually use New York City as a testing ground for these issues? We are very focused on using tech for good, and what we end up doing is actually bringing in entrepreneurs and companies from all over the world, Google, from the large companies like Google to much smaller startups, to come into New York and help solve these challenges. And some of the challenges we've launched over the past year or so include electric vehicles. So how should we think about electric vehicles charging stations? Where should we put them? How do we do fast charging infrastructure? The second is around connectivity. Believe it or not, internet is not that fast in New York. How do we make it faster, and how do we make it much more affordable for our residents using new technologies such as mesh networks and satellites and a whole host of other things? And then cybersecurity, which I think is a global threat. How do we protect some of our small businesses and residents from cyber threats, and what are new applications that we can develop in partnership with these companies? So that's a bit about what we're doing, and I think we'll launch into questions, and feel free to ask away. Thank you.
Great. Thank you to both. These were fascinating presentations, and what I particularly enjoyed was this. You both provided as an example of how a city can try to put the public interest at the forefront, and then consider how technology can help achieve those goals that are set. So in the case of Paris, you talked about very ambitious sustainability goals, a post-carbon city, and what potentially technology can help do to reach that. Or in the case of New York, the emphasis on equity and diversity, and how to have inclusive growth and that. So I'd maybe like to start with a question which deals with maybe the sort of role of the public sector, building off of this comment, and the role of the private sector. As you both well know, when we talk about smart city solutions in the private sector, very often what really is underneath those slogans is a kind of marketing facade to sell services. And really, and of course, services only survive if they're profitable. They will go out of business if they're not profitable. But what do you see the role of the public sector, especially at the municipal level, to be in order to nudge or encourage the private sector to also contribute towards the vision? That there are incredible examples that the city puts out, but the cities can only do that much. Like it or not, the vast majority of technologies are still produced in the private sector. So what can we do to nudge the private sector to move in the same direction?
Okay, well, I think I can speak to New York and also some other cities that we work with. The public sector does not create jobs. We fundamentally believe that. That is not our role. The public sector should create the infrastructure for smart development to happen within our cities. And one example that often comes to mind for me is autonomous vehicles. And I know there have been many sessions at the forum on the development of AVs and what that will look like in 5, 10, 15 years. And New York City is an interesting example where, as you can imagine, lots and lots of car companies want to come to New York and check the box that they launched a pilot in New York and they were able to traverse the streets of Lower Manhattan with an autonomous vehicle. And I give a lot of credit to those companies for having the gusto to come and ask me these things. But the reality is that what we want to do is we actually want to work with these companies to create frameworks, standards, privacy-related issues, and a whole host of other things to test those technologies at incremental steps. So in New York, we recently launched an initiative with a small startup from Boston, actually, to do a pilot program for an AV shuttle in an area called the Brooklyn Navy Yard in New York, which used to be a former shipbuilding facility, used to build ships for World War II. Now it's kind of similar to Station F. It's a huge new incubator area and focused on advanced manufacturing. And we actually have a use case for that shuttle, right? Because you get off the ferry and you need to go to the other side of the campus, and that walk is maybe about 25 minutes. And an AV shuttle can just sort of go back and forth. So what I think New York and other cities are doing is how do you, the private sector, come and work with us to solve some of these challenges on a step-by-step basis, and how do we influence the development of your technology at these very, very early stages to steer the ship a little bit so that it's actually beneficial to these cities when they scale in 10, 15 years, rather than often technologies are created in a box and they don't quite work when they're rolled out at scale.
I think it's a great example of saying, we just don't only want the tech to arrive on our streets. We set the rules. This is the sorts of problems we want tech to help us solve. And if you can do that, we welcome you. Right? That's really good.
Yeah. In the case of the City of Paris, we have several ways in order to foster a private initiative in order to develop the diverse cooperation with the private sector. In fact, 3 different points. The City of Paris has today 70,000 employees. This is a very big corporate. We have a nice program named Digital Transformation for City. This is the possibility for each one of employees of the City of Paris to propose a project in order to develop the process of discovering, developing until maturity, with the possibility to create the startups launched by the public sector and transform after in startups totally private. This is one initiative in the public municipality in order to fostering individual initiative. You have another initiative with small and middle entrepreneurship, because we have the universe of startups, Station F, incubators, accelerators, funding. But in France, in particular, we need to develop small and middle entrepreneurship, not only startups. We have several initiatives with private sector, with the companies, with the big companies, in order to help those small and middle relationship to grow, to develop new market, and to develop new market in the international attitude. We have creating a green fund in order to invest in this kind of operation. The other hand, the incubators in Paris, we have Station F, this is a private initiative, this is totally private, of course, fostering by the city of Paris, by the Station F, it is totally private, and we have 11 incubators of the city of Paris. Each one of incubators develop a vertical activity, tourism, food, financial, fintech, and other. And each one of these incubator, in reality, has been launching with the big companies. In fact, we have the possibility to offer different markets with the possibility to allow the public market with the cooperation between big companies and small companies and a startup. This is the market with the business reserved only for this kind of process. This is a real, a very concrete commitment for big companies in order to take part in the public market with the mandatory of small and startup companies.
Great. I want to switch gears for a moment and come back to a topic that Carlos raised, which is extremely ambitious, the sort of whole notion of cities changing course towards a carbon neutral future. Both New York and Paris are extremely dense cities. Some of the highest population densities in the world are found in the Paris Ring Road, not so much in the banlieue. And in New York, the city itself is very high density. Of course, the metropolitan area is another story. In planning circles, achieving or at least moving towards a carbon neutral future, besides individual behavior change, is very closely related to density. We cannot achieve any of these goals if we keep using the same amount of land, etc. Both cities here benefit from the fact that they were developed before the automobile. The urban form of Paris and New York predates the automobile. And so we're building these efforts on top of a very rich legacy of a dense city. What is your sort of advice to cities that are not blessed with an urban form that predates the automobile, where you try to use technology and perhaps public sector guidance to inch towards this carbon neutral challenge, which is truly a gargantuan challenge that all cities face, but not all are as lucky. And just as an example, in many cities, the new wealth, the new money, the first reaction is, of course, to get a big house and a big yard, and people want to move out. And what can technology do? What can public sector do to really tackle this goal of climate change and a more sustainable future outlook very seriously?
Yeah. Okay, this is a very, very good question, in fact, because this is the case. The city of Paris is the second high density in the world after Singapore, because the city of Paris, the center of Paris is very, very small. Today, the challenge for the city of Paris is to develop a new concept based on hyper proximity, the city of 15 minutes. What is this concept? This concept is we need, if we wanted to optimize energies, we want to optimize reduction of CO2 emission, we need to change the paradigm in order to develop the better quality of life. We need, in fact, to combine 4 elements. Proximity, hyper-proximity, density, in order to promote high building with the natural materials, neighborhood in particular, a mixity of social functions, of the urban social functions, and ubiquity. In fact, what is the main urban social functions? The urban social functions are 6 in cities: to live, to work, to feed, to care, to educate, to leisure. We have 6 urban social functions. Our bet is to develop this idea of hyper proximity based in the possibility to offer the access of citizens around 15 minutes with a soft mobility. It's not possible to duplicate all kinds of infrastructures. In the case of to care, it's not possible to have in 15 minutes to have an hospital. This is the new way with the possibility offered by digital technologies, because we could use digital technologies in order to supply, because we can offer tele-diagnostic, telemedicine, and this is the case for education. We don't have a university in all 15 minutes, but we have the possibility to reuse infrastructures in order to offer MOOC or other system. The concept of the city of 15 minutes, this is the possibility to develop the polycentric city. This is the multiple centralities based on this idea to optimize the possibilities for people to access without move on individual car, without moving with the diesel energies and other. This is the hyper proximity concept.
I agree with everything, just don't build new roads. That will just force people to use the existing services and build higher.
Yeah.
It's very simple.
It's very interesting. I mean, there's very few examples, and one that comes to mind is actually Zurich. When they were battling the sort of car and traffic issues in the 1970s, they introduced a rule that said we were literally going to fix the amount of streets, road space in the city and not expand.
Yeah.
And that's something that very, very few cities have actually had the courage to do when they're growing. But without further ado, I just want to take one round of questions. We can aggregate up. If there are questions, maybe we can take 2 or 3 and then just have one last round of responses. So are there any questions for the 2 speakers? If not, I can go on. There's one over here.
In Russian, it's okay?
So if we...
Yeah, we have the translation. Go ahead. Greetings to you. My name is Morozova Nadezhda. Let's say that I'm working as the in St. Petersburg as just volunteer, so we're making only first steps on the development of this concept in St. Petersburg. I would like to hear the advice from you. What should we do? Because first steps from our side is the opening of 2 universities, architectural universities, which are related to IT technologies, and labs for adopting startups, so some similar situation, but probably we're skipping one of the important moments.
And before we get that, one more question. Anywhere? Okay, we're also very close to time, so maybe you guys can take a stab at this. What advice do you have for St. Petersburg scaling up a smart cities program?
I would say actually open up your city government, your city agencies to allow these companies that are in the incubators that are coming out of the research labs at the universities to actually test their ideas in the city. I often comment that I wish New York City actually took an equity position in all of the companies that come knocking on our doors, you know, everything from Uber and Airbnb to some of these smaller companies, some new startups, because New York City would be so wealthy if we actually, you know, made that investment as a city and with our own tax dollars, because New York has often served as the, what I like to call the petri dish, right, the test bed for new technologies. So I'd advise St. Petersburg to do the same. New York did not have an equity fund. I advise St. Petersburg to make an equity fund, but yeah, open up your city, open up your streets, open up your housing to be able to test some of the innovations.
Okay, so maybe just to summarize, I think this sort of openness comment rings really well with. Did any of you attend Richard Sennett's Skype interview yesterday, who couldn't actually come in person? But so those of you who know Richard's work, he really has been promoting this concept of an open city. I was happy to see it on Anne Hidalgo's platform as well. And really what it talks about is, how do we build cities that promote interconnectivity, that promote open access and equitable access, rather than form closed communities, whether they're digital or physical? How do we avoid the gated community? How do we avoid the closed Facebook group or closed digital platforms, and really promote equal access? And I think this maybe summarizes pretty close what a smart city really could be about. Rather than this sort of marketplace for selling services, it could be about promoting equal access to the most opportunities that the city can provide. Two, offering the greatest choice to the end users, so they can themselves choose how they want to live and what is good for them. And three, do all of that with the least ecological footprint. And I think that's kind of like a nice way of extending this definition of smart city, not just to physical technologies, but also to housing programs, to equity programs, to other things, because smartness is really not about having a phone, but building a community that is that makes a sum that's greater than its parts, that promotes energies that come together in an open manner. So I thank you very much, both of you, and if there's any more questions, you can please approach the speakers in the audience. Thanks.
Thank you.